Hi everyone, welcome back. It's Moa, aka Swedish Whiskey Girl, and today we're going to talk a little bit about books, and of course it's whiskey books. I had some requests on Instagram last week, I think, to do some maybe recommendations and just talk a bit about whiskey books I have at home. I love reading. I was that kid in school because we lived in the countryside where my parents still live, you didn't have easy access to a big library. Of course the school had some books, but every third Wednesday or something, there would be something called a book bus that came up to the school and you could go visit it on your lunch break. And the staff there knew who I was because I was there every single time they came and got like a big pile of books. So I love reading. And even later on, when I was old enough to go into the town to go to the big library, the city library, I quickly became acquainted with the staff due to my I was there quite a lot, you could say. So yes, whiskey books are of course something that I also enjoy, and it was a big help to me on the beginning of my whiskey journey, and it still is. It's always something new to learn. So I have some books here in front, next to me, and some of them I haven't even had the time to read yet, and they're sitting on my shelf and I really want to read them soon, and some I haven't read in ages because I've just been lucky enough to be busy, I guess. And yeah, the first one I'm going to talk about is this one here, the Malt Whiskey Yearbook. I'm sure a lot of people have heard of this. I'm not going to talk too much about each book, but just a little bit about each and every one, kind of sum it up, and then hopefully maybe we can revisit it in the future. But yeah, the Malt Whiskey Yearbook, this is 2019, and these are written by Ingvar Runde, and he every year lists up distilleries. There's some interesting articles in it. So you can see Glenfarclas, and then you have information about it, you have their history, their timeline, their expressions. It's just a really good way to look up information. I use it a lot for tastings, if I'm doing specific distilleries and I'm like, oh, what is nice to know about Glenfarclas? When did it start? Who founded it? Things like that. What's their capacity? And just looking up things there. Sometimes with little stories as well. So it's a really good one if you're looking up specific distilleries. It's primarily Scotland, but then at the end there's usually some world whiskies as well. They're getting a little bit less space, but there's still usually some fun information on them. And from quite a small book to a much bigger one, this is the World Atlas of Whiskey by Dave Broome. I have a second edition, and yeah, it's quite a hefty one. I'll see if I can find something to show you. It has both sections on the Highlands, for example, on each of the regions, and then dives into some distilleries. So there's one section here on Bladnoch, Annandale and Ilse Bay. The art of blending, there's grain distilleries, there's the discussing whiskey from all different parts of the world, how they differ. This is the book that I got to help me learn the basics of whiskey. Not just Scotch whiskey all over the world. And I mean, Dave Broome is quite a recognised whiskey writer, and I think the way he writes things quite easy to understand, even though you might not know everything yet. There's good pictures, there's illustrations. It's yeah, I think this is a great one if you're looking for something maybe just to expand your whiskey knowledge, or if you just want one book where you have most things. I really like this one. I have the World Atlas of Wine as well. I think it's the same kind of category, the ones with the similar names, which is also really good. But yeah, it's more than 200 distilleries explored and 750 expressions tasted. He's done extensive research. So yeah, that's my starting one. Another one that I got as a gift, which I really loved, is this Whiskey Women. It's called The Untold Story of How Women Saved the Bourbon, Scotch and Irish Whiskey by Fred Minnick. if you like stories, I love stories behind whiskey. That's one of the main things why I really like it. This is stories of Helen Cummings, it's stories of Bessie Williamson of Lafroig, and it's fascinating. It's stories, and it's just gives you a depiction of what life was in the times where these women lived, and even though they might not take center stage always, their presence in history, for me especially as a woman in the whiskey industry, just is fascinating. So if you like stories of people behind the scenes, or just people in the industry, you want a little bit of a view of what the times used to be, or yeah, I think this is a good one. I've also used this to do research on some texts that I've written. For my old work, I wrote one about Helen from Cardew, and yeah, I really like it. It's I have to read it again soon, I think. It's just I think the text in it is a bit old-fashioned as well, which I really enjoy, being a bit of a vintage enthusiast. Next up, we have this one called Goodness Knows. It is by Richard Patterson and Gavin D. Smith, The Passionate Revelations of a Scotch Whisky Master Blender. And I know a lot of people might know already who Richard is. He is the master blender for Whitey Mackay for Dalmore, working with Juror, Fetter Cairn. Now he's moving on to work with Wolf Craig, and it's been, I would say, 50 years I think now in the industry. He's quite a character. When I've had the pleasure of meeting him, he's been nothing but friendly and funny, and he has a way of kind of taking in a room, which I think is really fun to see. And this is just kind of his depictions of how he started and how things went on. There's a lot of photos in it that show you a little bit of what things looked back in the day, for example. And I mean, it's quite funny. He's quite a funny man, so I think if you want to read about a person who has grown with the whiskey industry and his thoughts and experiences, this is a good one. I think it's interesting when you get a personal connection to a person instead of maybe just reading general things. So yeah, and you can often get, I think I got this for maybe like a $5 on Amazon, so it doesn't have to be expensive either. Let's have a look. I am going to do 2 more books that I've actually read, and then I have 3 that I haven't read yet, or one of them I think I might have read a really long time ago, but I can't really remember what it was like. But next up is A Ramble Around the Globe, revisited in the footsteps of Tommy Juror. It's by Malcolm Greenwood, and it has illustrations as well. It looks a bit like a children's tale, but it's funny. It's also one of those that is a depiction of time, because Malcolm also, I'm trying to remember what it says. So Malcolm Greenwood was the export sales manager of Glenfarclas, and in 1998 he set out to kind of retrace the steps of Tommy Jurors that he did in his day, and then some of the sections where you can read what Tommy did and then how Malcolm's experience of the same kind of part of the journey was. And Tommy Juror is, of course, just a fascinating man, so I think this is a fun one. It's not very long, but it's just to give you an idea. So we'll say MG and TG and Malcolm Greenwood and then Tommy Juror, so of course, so you can kind of see their parallel footsteps. And it's also quite funny. It's a bit of an insight to whiskey history. Also another blending personality, of course. Tommy Jurors was a whiskey baron, I guess you could call them. So yeah, I just realised I might be talking very quickly. I'm very sorry about that. Breathe. Or maybe it's fine, I hope it is. And this one I absolutely love. This is Whiskey, a Tasting Course. It's by Eddie Ludlow, I think, Ludlow. and this is beautiful. I saw this in a bookshop and had to buy it just because of its beautiful illustrations. It has information on different types of whiskies. In North America, for example, it has the different regions. What's Tennessee whiskey? It has the Japanese whiskies. It has the different regions for Scotland. Explaining corn whiskey, explaining rye whiskey, what's blended malt. This is also one of those books that are really, really good if you are looking to learn more about everything. If you just want something that can take you into a lot of the different aspects of whiskey, what the different categories of whiskey are, what is the differences between the different regions, what's the difference between different parts of the world, what's their history. It's just a kind of a short insight to all the history, but it's definitely a good one if you are maybe a beginner, or if you are an enthusiast who might not know too much about different types or different countries. Or I think this is a great gift as well. This is, I spoke about the Atlas of Whiskey before, which is this compendium, which is quite massive. But if you just want something that's a little bit maybe easier to carry around for sure, or maybe just a good gift for someone who's interested in whiskey, who might be getting into whiskey, who's already a big fan of whiskey, because I mean it's still a beautiful book and it has this kind of copper shine. I don't know if you can see it here in the light, and with the blue, and I think I'm a sucker for visual things, so yeah, I really like this one. It's really clear information as well. Let's see, what can we show? For example, in Ireland, you have a little map of Ireland. It'll tell you some of the information. It's the background, the distilleries, the locations, the main whiskey styles. So yes, big fan of this one. I mean, I have chosen kind of the nice ones, the ones that I'm very fascinated by. So yes, and now we have some books that I haven't actually read yet, and I really hope my parents aren't watching this, because one of them was a gift from them, and it's this one called Whiskey Rebellina. This is in Swedish. I don't actually know if they've released it in another language, but this is basically the story of Mackmyra and how Sweden became a whiskey country, by Rickard Lundborg. And I really wanted this for a long time because I wanted to read Mackmyra's story, and I haven't done it yet. I haven't had time, but I definitely want to do it. So if you've read it, let me know. Did you think it was good? Did you not like it? Why? But this one is on my to read list. Next up is also a Swedish one. This was gifted by the author, Daniel Bruce, and it's called Japansk whisky och annan asiatisk single malt av världsklass, or Japanese whiskey and other Asian single malt of world class, I guess. It's a really nice one, and especially on, I really want to learn about Japanese whiskies more, and I think this book is definitely going to help me to do it. It shows you different expressions, it tells you all about different distilleries, and a lot of them I've never really heard of, and there's a lot of fascinating images in it as well. This one is in Swedish as well. And then the last one, where I actually just realised I have a bonus one, which I have to get because I don't know where it is. But this one I have read at some point, but haven't for a long time. I remember liking it, and it's the Malt Whiskey, The Complete Guide by Charles Mclean. And Charles is of course a very renowned whiskey author as well, and it's one of those that like it'll explain yeast to you, and it'll talk about a lot more about the history, and at the end it also talks about different expressions, but it also explains the regions. And I think this is more of a deeper dive into a little bit more history, and a little bit more, instead of just talking about different things quite quickly and giving you an insight, this actually dives a little bit deeper into it. But I will read this very soon, and I'll let you know. And I have to go get that final one, and then we'll wrap it up. It's just a second. Here we go, back. And this is of course A Long Stride by Nicholas Morgan, the story of world's #1 Scotch whisky. Johnnie Walker. It's also one I haven't managed to read yet. I think this is going to focus a lot more on the history, which is fascinating, and I can't wait to read it. Cody started a little bit already, and he said it's a lot of kind of information and history, but haven't read it so far. But yeah, there's a lot of good whiskey books out there, and there's some that I really want to read that I don't have a home yet, but I'd love to hear your recommendations. Have you read any of these? What did you think about them? Or do you have any that you really want us to avoid, or recommendations for just anyone? Maybe some beginners or enthusiasts, then please let me know in the comments here below. And of course, I hope you have enjoyed this video, and if you have, please consider leaving a thumbs up and maybe subscribe if you haven't already. I would of course also be absolutely over the moon if you consider using my affiliate links the next time you're shopping with either Master Malt, the Whiskey Exchange, or the Scotch Malt Whisky Society. All the information is of course in the section here below as well as links to my other social channels if you're curious about that. And as always, I want to say a massive thank you to my wonderful supporters on Patreon. I'm so grateful I have you guys with me on my whiskey journey. But I hope you've all had an absolutely wonderful day. Sláinte.